Welcome to Ecotopia U Media. I'm your host, Melissa McGinnis, joined by my fabulous co-host, Tom Wright.
Well, nice to see you again.
Yes, you won't go away. I keep seeing you. Just kidding. Okay, this chapter is about green in the news.
Yes, it is.
What is happening? I hear some big things are going on over across the pond.
Then across the pond, as they call it, in the UK, there's a department store chain, Selfridges, that stopped selling plastic bottled waters to encourage ocean cleanup.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, because last year they sold over 400,000 single-use water bottles. And they have restaurants and food halls within their department stores, and that's where they're getting sold. They, of course, are going to offer drinking water, but not in plastic.
Do you think they'll start selling maybe water like encapsulated in other vehicles, like an aluminum, or like you see some of the Tetra, like a...
Yeah, no, they could become in boxes, cartons, or they could come in aluminum or glass.
Do you think this is going to set a precedent?
It's really interesting that way because, you know, there are obviously issues with too many plastics in the ocean. And so part of that is the metaphor, of course, is to using a tap in your mind. If there's so much plastic, you have to slow up the tap. Ironically, using water as a metaphor, you have to slow the flow of plastics that could end up in the water. In Britain itself, the government, starting in October, is requiring larger shops to charge 5 pence for single-use bags in England. That's throughout England. So there is a push to slow down the amount of plastic in society, or put a price on its head at minimum. What they did is they eliminated it. They got immediate negative feedback from the British Plastic Federation, who actually used the word, they were dismayed at the decision by Selfridges to remove plastic bottled waters from sale, which I find it a little ironical, because if you're not, you know, if you're, what's the phrase, if you're not part of the problem, then you're not part of the solution, or
if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
There we go. There's the one we go. Again, a water metaphor, solution, by the way.
Well, I mean, the risk is obviously big because they sold 400,000 units of water bottles, but in terms of being their primary source of revenue, they're more of a retail outlet that sells other things. So, I mean, it's a nice way for someone to cross the line, to really make that commitment. And for someone who it's not a significant part of their business, hopefully they'll follow suit.
Well, it is kind of interesting just from sort of if you look at it from the packaging wars point of view, obviously what Selfridges is doing to the plastic industry is basically a pushback that water can come in glass or it can come in cartons. And so we'll have to see if other people accept that as the remedy. Yeah, I think the jury's out on that. I think a lot of people like plastic water bottles because they're so convenient and they don't break. Tetra Paks and cartons are not clear, so that's, ironically, that's part of what I think people seek out in a plastic water container, is the fact that it's relatively clear and they can see the product. So.
Well, I mean, the staggering volume of plastic entering our oceans every year is having a devastating effect on our marine wildlife, from tiny corals to great whales. That's true. That's very, very true, but opens a dialogue to other horrendous things we're doing to our oceans, like runoff, abuse of pesticides. Those things are also killing corals.
Oh yeah,
and
there's of course the
plankton.
There's the famous dead zone out the mouth of Mississippi, which is from all the upstream pesticides and herbicides that are used on farmlands up in the states that are far, far north. You know, so we know that that's true. Again, I find this kind of interesting just from the packaging wars perspective, that plastic being, if you look at the over, I'll try to do this right so the audience can see it. If you look at where beverages packaging has gone from the 70s, plastic is like this, okay?
Yeah.
And glass is like this, and aluminum somewhere in the middle, kind of bouncing around. Mm-hmm. And cartons are increasing as a use of packaging for beverages too. And so it's just kind of fascinating from that point of view. Is plastic going to finally sort of slow down, because finally we're realizing that there's just so much plastic you can have in the environment, and that people aren't that responsible enough, even though the claim of the Plastic Federation is that all these products are 100% recyclable. The other irony that I like to find in this whole debate, by the way, is everybody's picking on plastic water bottles, but there's just as much plastic soda bottles.
I totally agree.
And so there's this irony in that, again, the assumption being that soda is not as good for you as water.
If you were going to plasticize something, it might as well be water over a sugar-based.
You would think that argument would show up in some of these people's treatise here, but it doesn't show up. So it's just one of those fascinating set aside things.
But it's good to remind ourselves there was a time that we did live without plastic bottles.
Oh, and we did live, but
soda was in aluminum, and plastic came from the tap.
Yeah, it's water, you know. Again, generally speaking, that would, as a consumer, I think the thing that we want to keep reminding ourselves of is we want to have good drinking water sources. And that we get sort of stuck in this argument of plastic versus this versus that. And really what we need is good water. And so how do we get good water? We should keep that agenda moving, that's for sure.
Oh gosh, you just brought up a whole nother subject.
Well, but again, I don't know. Is it another subject or isn't?
Good water.
Yeah.
If we start with that, so we could drink our tap, we would go back to the fracking conversation and all these other ways we're destroying our own drinking supply.
The aquifer, yeah.
Okay, well, this is.
So what else?
Well, let's just say that we do applaud
Selfridges
for making this step and opening the dialogue to even bigger issues.
Yes.
Moving on to in the news, I hear my old buddy HRH is in the news.
Yeah, tell us what HRH means. So
His Royal Highness.
His Royal Highness, and his mother's still alive, so that's all he is. His name, of course, we know him as Prince Charles, and he's come out loud and clear and talked about rewiring the global economy to stop climate change. And the heir to the throne calls for an end to business-as-usual approach that does nothing to avert catastrophic global warming, and praises the British newspaper The Guardian climate campaign.
So this goes to just a much broader conversation, but also reminds me of the conversation we were having with Conrad about manufacturing responsibility. Is HRH suggesting that a business model has to have sustainability built in within it?
Yeah, it's that
rewiring.
Rewiring, and of course what he's more than hinting at is the idea of what's called a circular economy, which is an economy based on quality of life, not quantity of life. That's one of the biggest shifts. In other words, you don't. You've seen the bumper sticker that says he who acquires more toys wins. You know, and that's not. And what we're trying to articulate is no, that it really isn't the goal. You know, you should be allowed to acquire some sort of level of material satisfaction, but there is an excess that's occurred in the last 30, 40 years in particular. The Prince praised efforts to persuade pension funds and other charities to stop investing in major fossil fuel companies, arguing that the divestment movement has attracted broad-based support. He added that it has sharpened investors' focus not just on the risk of holding hydrocarbon stocks within their portfolios, but also the ever more pressing need to divert vastly more capital into clean energy, low-carbon investments, and infrastructure projects.
Well, we just were discussing, was it Selfridges in his town, Selfridges?
Yeah.
And the point that maybe our audience might not be aware of is that, yeah, plastic is terrible because it's not being recycled. It's also made from oil.
Most of the time, that's true.
So,
although Coke has an initiative to make it from sugarcane residue, from bagasse.
But traditionally, it's made from oil. And so I think part of circular economy is, yeah, you know, we have to recycle, but I think we have to cut down on plastic in its totality.
I mean, the two basic principles of the circular economy is live off renewable energy, and there is no waste.
Right.
And so the idea of creating products that whose end of life is almost on purpose waste is anti-cyclical. So we definitely, this whole idea that you can throw things away, as we've talked about before, is sort of a silly image when you think about it, because where is this a way that you're throwing it?
It's not a way. It's just not in your vision.
It's not in your vision, and you're burdening future generations is what you're saying to yourself.
Okay, next in the news.
Let them take care of it.
What's next in the green news?
Well, next in the green news, John Oliver, I think, is next in the green news. John Oliver did a John Oliver, the entertainer, the comedian John Oliver, who got his big start on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, now has his own show called Last Week Tonight, which of course is meant to be a pun in itself. But he did an 18-minute segment on talking about food waste in America. And it's worth seeing. Again, all you have to do is search on John Oliver Talks Food Waste, or Slams Food Waste is how I found it, and the video will pop up.
Maybe we can link it to the end of this.
I hope we can, because it's insightful and of course very funny. His ability to play on words to get us to rethink is excellent. I mean, he's a very special comedian, no doubt about it.
We'll take a look at that. We'll hopefully have it connected to this interview at the end of us speaking. But in terms of food waste, what are some of the statistics?
Well, the statistics that are being thrown out now is that 40% of all the food that is when they say produced, by the way, they mean purchased. By the way, because there's food left on the field, and they're not counting that. Okay, they're counting there's food that got to market. Okay, 40% of that does not get eaten. So that's a lot when you think about it. Okay, and then you add on top of it that it's potentially the statistic I heard from a gentleman in Sacramento recently was that 8% of an additional 8% is actually left on the field, because it's either not marketable or it's just the process of picking or harvesting. If you're harvesting a grain, you're not getting every single kernel of wheat when you're harvesting it. Okay, so you're leaving some on the field, not just by the practice of how you harvest it.
So not only the energy that goes into growing this food is wasted 40%, but then the food waste issue comes up, because where, like you said, where does it go?
Well, I mean, another article suggested that about of the 40%, a full 10% or 25% of the 40% is us at home, food we purchased and we don't use. And when you think of people saying they're on tight budgets, then you should ask them, did they waste any food? Mm-hmm. You know. So, and of course, there's a perfect correlation to more money you have, the more food you waste.
Well, and there's also a correlation to climate change associated with food waste.
Well, for those who would, if you're going to go there, then that's the whole industrial agricultural. Then we're back to Prince Charles, who is suggesting. It
always comes back to Prince Charles.
Well, Prince is an ecological thinker, system thinker. I mean, you know, you can make all the punch you want about him being His Royal Highness, but the fact is that he is a special thinker, and he deserves credit for that. And he thinks in systems. He believes in organic agriculture as an absolute, which I shouldn't freak you out there. Again, if you eat better food, you don't need as much food.
True.
And so, you know, so the idea that you're building soil while you're producing food, you would think that would be considered economical, because you're not having to make up for the soil you lost.
And the right thing to do. We discussed with Tom Newmark, regenerative agriculture. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have a more fertile, healthier soil to grow better and better yielding crops?
And then the farm labor doesn't get poisoned. I mean, there's so many more benefits to growing healthy food.
No runoff to the ocean.
No runoff to the ocean, the soil.
So I think we've solved the world's problems at this Green in the News this week.
Well, we could, you know, and we're not trying to point the finger at the word anything that ends in SIDE, but it's damn close. I mean, if it's herbicides, fungicides, or pesticides, you have to wonder why we had to intervene in nature so much to kill. Because that's what side means, right? Is to kill. Homicide is to murder somebody.
So pesticide is to kill. If it's going to kill an animal or a pest, isn't it going to kill us as well?
You would think there might be.
Cancer rates are high, raising.
We know that cancer clusters exist in where agricultural chemicals are used at the highest. That's true. That has been documented.
Well, thank you for joining us here at Ecotopia U, where we aim to educate and activate. I hope we educated you on some topics today, and I hope that we also activated you to find out more on your own and continue watching us here at Ecotopia U.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.